Hello and welcome back, class. I'm going to take this lecture to talk about two things. First, I'm going to talk about the key developments that have taken place in human evolutionary history, and also the great migration of human beings across the globe, explaining how we got to where we are today, which is global, which is worldwide. Now, when talking about human evolution, just as when talking about evolution in general, there are some hang-ups that people these preconceived notions that people have in their mind that sort of prevent us from fully understanding this. And one of the things concerning human evolution that is really a pitfall to a lot of people, it's really a hindrance to a lot of people. If I talk about the evolutionary development of human beings, the picture that comes into most of your minds will probably be the scale that you've seen, starting from like chimpanzees and moving up, and you got these like cavemen-like guys, and then moving up to modern humans, right? That scale of them walking together. And this is a hang-up because it's an incorrect view of evolution in general, but specifically it's an incorrect view of human evolution. The human evolutionary lineage, if you sort of look back at it, doesn't resemble a straight line or this sort of gradual progression, but rather the image that you should have in your head is more of like a tree with all these different branches going out, and on these branches you have all these different twigs and twigs coming out of twigs, and this big unfolding, branching, spreading big tree of life. Okay, this is the image that you should have in our head. Now evolution in general holds that we all come from the same common ancestor, not just human beings and chimpanzees, but everything. Everything stems from the same common ancestor, and from that common ancestor we get the diversity of life that we see today. And human beings, and the development of human beings, represents one small branch or one small chain or link on that giant evolutionary tree. Now the branch that we come from is the family known as hominid, which originates in Africa anywhere between 7 to 5 million years ago. Now when we're talking about dates for this lecture, they're going to be a lot less precise than when we talk about dates for the upcoming lectures, simply because the amount of evidence that we have is constantly changing. In fact, the dates change from when I taught this class last semester, as we'll see. So we're constantly finding new information. We're constantly finding new evidence. And as a result, the dates that I'm going to give are relatively tentative. In fact, they are very subject to change because our picture of humanity's past of evolutionary past in general is constantly evolving. Sorry for the pun. But hominids begin anywhere from about 7 to 5 million years ago. Our family branch originating here in Africa, specifically Central Africa, which looked at the time a lot different than it does now. If you picture Africa in your head, you can't really see it on this map, but there are several distinctive geographical regions in Africa, of course. Probably the most defining of which is the Sahara Desert, which separates North Africa from Sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa, if you Google Africa, what you're probably going to get a picture of is the African savanna with the lions and the buffalo and the hyenas, the giraffes, right? All that stuff is probably what pops into most of your heads when I say Africa. But Africa didn't look like that back then. More of like a rainforest. What would be going on here in the modern day Congo, for example. So hominids originated in Africa. Now the family that we come from, the hominids, don't emerge till about 2 to 3 million years ago. And the hominids are unique because the hominids are the first branch of the family to move out of Africa, to spread into, first of all, into the Middle East, to Southeast Asia, and into parts of Europe. And the hominid family, as it spreads, it starts to become more diverse, and you get really three big branches of the hominid family. First of all, you get what's referred to as Homo florus. Homo florus, a distinct branch that emerges in the Pacific Islands area, specifically Indonesia, this region over here. Homo florus, and I'm going to butcher these pronunciations, I can go ahead and tell you. And Homo heidelbergensis that emerges here in Europe. Now, Homo florus, I don't know if you've ever heard any information about these guys. They often get the nickname of hobbits. I don't know if you've read a news article about this. They were characteristically short, anywhere from about 3 to 4, 5 feet tall, about around 3 feet tall, give or take. So really short guys, a distinctive branch of the hominids that emerge, specifically the genus Homo, and the heidelbergensis that emerges here in Europe, perhaps the most famous of which are the Neanderthals. So those are two, and the third, of course, is us. And we emerge here in Central Africa, this area here, modern-day Sudan, Ethiopia, this region here, Central Africa, what's referred to as the Rift Valley, this sort of general region here. Modern human beings go by the scientific name Homo sapiens sapiens, emerge in the Rift Valley about 200,000 years ago. About 200,000 years ago, give or take 50,000 years. So estimates range anywhere from 250 to 150,000 years ago. But so we'll just say 200,000 years. My image is going to cut off here periodically. So human beings first emerged in the Rift Valley about 200,000 years ago. But there are certain key developments that take place even before we get here. Developments that are going to shape our history. These developments, you have the development of social structure. Listen guys, you have social structure within hominids for millions of years before human beings even get here. There's social structure that takes place. With social structures, you get social hierarchy. You get different jobs, quote unquote, associated with different members of the group. You get group structure, group dynamics. Of course, human beings are no different. We have the same sort of social structures that are evident within these hominids, and even within like chimpanzees today, for example. You see the exact same thing here. Now, what starts to really distinguish hominids, what starts to really distinguish the genus Homo is its bipedalism. It's bipedalism. The bipedalism just refers to the ability to walk on the ability to walk on 2 feet. This is what starts to separate the hominids from new distinct branches that are emerging. I think the first of which is Australopithecus africanus is the first species of hominids, of homos, that start to walk on 2 feet. And this is advantageous for several reasons, but why it's significant for our story is it's going to allow faster and further travel. We're transitioning here from a species that lives primarily within the trees to a species that is more mobile, that is walking around more, and is not staying put. And that's the key. So from social structure to bipedalism, and now we start to get into some of the things that really, really make us unique and that really make us human. The first of which is tools. Tools, the creation of and the use of tools in creative ways. You see this even before modern humans, even before us. But you really start to see this with the genus Homo, the use of tools to get meat off of carcasses, for example. And as we develop the use of more and more tools for different purposes, such as hunting, such as gathering, the creation of spears, the creations of axes to chop wood, very creative ways. Now, all of these 3, 4, 5, and 6 are really happening in conjunction with each other, I believe. You really can't separate these into sort of like distinct categories. You can't point to one on a timeline and then point to the beginning of another on the timeline. I think they all kind of correlate with each other. So with tools, you have an increase in brain size. Our brains are physically getting bigger. With an increase in brain size, at some point along the evolutionary lineage, you have the development of language. What probably started off as basic sounds and perhaps hand signals eventually morphed into what we have today, the distinctive world languages. And at some point along the line, the development of consciousness. Now, most psychologists and anthropologists today talk about consciousness on a sliding scale, that we see different levels of consciousness within nature, right? Human beings, of course, are conscious in the sense that we are self-aware. We are aware that we are alive, and we are aware that one day we will die. But you see certain degrees of consciousness within the animal kingdom in general. A prime example of that, for example, would be your personal pets, your cats or dogs. Dogs are in some way conscious, not as conscious as we are perhaps, but you have this sort of this sliding scale of consciousness. But at some point in the development of humanity, we get the sort of consciousness that we have today, the awareness of self, the awareness of our existence, and the awareness of our own deaths. What sort of evolutionary purpose the development of consciousness has, I think is still widely a matter of debate. But these key developments are going to lay the bedrock and are going to lie at the heart of everything else that we're going to be talking about in this class. And I think what they all hint at, if we can take away some larger message from this of what makes humanity distinct, is not any one of these individually. You may have heard human beings referred to as the tool makers or the language speakers, or that were religious. But I think what sort of categorizes all of this, if we could put this all under one general umbrella, is human beings' unique creativity. That is our ability, I think, related to our consciousness, our ability to use each one of these in very unique, innovative, creative ways. Okay, so those are the key developments that take place in our prehistory. Now let's talk about the massive human migration. One second, guys. Human migration. So human beings first appear in sub-Saharan Africa in the Rift Valley about 200,000 years ago. Is when the first Homo sapiens sapiens appears. That's when we appear. From there, human beings start to migrate out of Africa. Now, the reason why they are migrating out of Africa, again, that's a matter of debate. It's a matter of discussion. Probably had something to do with climate change, a changing environment here in Africa. Perhaps the environment was changing, and as a result, human beings' common food supply was changing. These early human beings probably traveled in family units. You can think about it as groups of anywhere between 10 to 30 to 50 people, perhaps, who probably followed large groups of animals, who probably followed seasonal foods, as far as like grains and stuff like that goes. So something happens that causes large family groups to move out of Africa starting, again, these dates range beginning around 80 to 70,000 years ago. 80 to 70,000 years ago, human beings move out of Africa and into the modern-day Middle East, this region here. So beginning around 80,000 years ago, for whatever reason, human beings move out of Africa into the modern-day Middle East. By about 70 to 60,000 years, human beings have reached Southeast Asia. And by Southeast Asia, I mean India, Pakistan, China, and all the small countries in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, all those other places. So from about 70 to 60,000 years ago, human beings reach Southeast Asia. This is where it gets really interesting, okay? By 50,000 years ago, human beings have reached Australia. By 50,000 years ago, so they were traveling across seas at this point. By 50,000 years ago, human beings have reached Australia. Also, by 50 to 40,000 years ago, by about 50 to 40,000 years ago, human beings have made their way into modern-day Europe. 50 to 40,000 years, we've reached Europe and we've reached Australia. From there, human beings start to make their way up into Central Asia. Up into Central Asia. So from about 50 to 40,000 years, human beings reach modern-day Russia, the steppes of Asia, Mongolia. And then another big jump happens, and human beings migrate from Asia to the Americas, to America. And the dates on the, again, these dates are constantly changing, but our best estimates is anywhere between 30 to 15,000 years ago, human beings reach the Americas, and within about 1,000 years, have colonized. By 15,000 years, we've colonized all of North and South America. And I say the dates change because literally I taught this at the beginning of spring semester 2017, and the date was about 20 to 15,000 years. And by the time the semester ended, we have archaeological sites that were discovered along the North American coast here that indicated that human beings had gotten to North America as early as 30,000 years. Nevertheless, by 15,000 years, human beings had occupied and populated all of the continents of the world, with the exception, of course, of Antarctica. Okay, that's all I got for this lecture. Next, I want you to watch the lecture on the Neolithic Revolution, which is going to take place about 12,000 years, which is going to forever change the course of human history. That's all I got for this, guys. If you got any questions,